Hey y'all, it's officially 2021, which means I can officially say I got my MFA last year, which is crazy. So I thought it would be cool to do a video looking back on my experience and talk about the ways that my MFA benefited me and some of the ways that it didn't. So I'm going to share with you 6 of the things that I really enjoyed about my MFA and 6 things that I didn't. It's crazy for me to look back a few years at when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was asking people who had gotten MFAs, and I heard mixed things, and so I wasn't really sure, but I decided to go ahead with it, and yeah, now I'm here. If you are currently where I was a few years ago, wondering if you want to do an MFA or wondering how to apply, stay tuned to the end because I have a couple of resources that will help you with your application process. Okay, so let's jump into it. A lot of what I'm going to say is specific to my program, but I'm pretty sure that pretty much everything I'm going to say will apply, at least to some extent, no matter where you apply and attend. Let's start with the good stuff. I want to talk first about the community that I was a part of, which was awesome. I loved my MFA cohort. I loved the creative writing program. Lots of great people, both students and faculty. I still keep in touch to some extent with my cohort, and I workshop with some of them still. They're connections that I value and they're people that I respect. And like I said, the professors were great too. I really appreciate all of the work that they put into making our experience a good one. I'm particularly grateful for the poet Tom C. Hunley, who I got to take a poetry workshop from and several other classes as well. Before the program even started, he contacted me on Facebook and invited me to go have coffee with himself and some of the other MFA students so I could meet some people. I also really appreciate how earnest he was about the creative process, not only our own, but also his own. He was right in the trenches with us with writing and submitting and publishing. It was cool as a poet and an essayist to work with another poet who had so many connections in the literary world and was so active in it. Tom Hunley actually just won Rattle Magazine's chapbook contest, which is kind of a big deal. And I recently picked up a copy of his book, Adjusting to the Lights. It's really good. I recommend it. One cool thing, this is a little vain of me maybe to mention, but my name is in one of these poems, which I think is so cool. I was able to workshop a couple of these poems with him in different settings, and my name ended up in one of them, which is fun, especially since Billy Collins picked up this book and read it and spoke very highly of it in a broadcast that he did. He actually teared up at one point when he was reading one of Dr. Hunley's poems. It's that good. So maybe it's a little vain of me, but I think it's cool that I'm in a very small way a part of this book and that Billy Collins read a poem with my name in it. I think that's fun. One of the huge benefits of my program, Western Kentucky University, was that it was fully funded. I got a stipend and I got my tuition paid. Yeah, I had to tutor and teach classes and stuff to get that money, but I didn't mind doing that. It's a good experience. I enjoyed that for the most part. The funding was great for a few reasons. First, I didn't have to worry about money as much when I was in school, and for the most part, students don't have to take out student loans, which is great because I've heard other people say it. I agree with it. An MFA is not a degree you want to go into debt to get if you can help it, because it's not really going to make you a lot of money. I actually did go into a little bit of debt, but that wasn't because of the program or anything else. That's because my wife and I had a baby during the program, which was nuts, and it made it harder for us to work on the side. But we survived. It was great. But yeah, for the most part, people don't need loans when you go to a fully funded program. So it takes some of the financial stress away. And it also helps to discourage competition that can leak into a program. I've heard that where programs will fund some students and not others, sometimes it creates a really competitive atmosphere that can get a little toxic. So I'm really glad I just kind of avoided that completely. If you can get into a fully funded program, I highly recommend it. There's plenty of them, and there's also plenty that are partially funded in some way. So definitely consider those programs. During my second year, I taught 4 sections of English 100. Overall, I thought it was a really cool experience, and whether or not I teach college again for the rest of my life, I can say I have taught college, which is cool. I like being able to say that. Some people might see having to teach as a drawback because it takes away from the time you have to write and study, which is true, it does. But I think it was really beneficial for me. I appreciated the experience and I appreciate the boost to my CV. I don't think teaching while you're in an MFA program is something you should be scared of. I was terrified before I started, and even while I was doing it, often I was terrified, but it worked out okay. It was fun. Gosh, it's hard to finish a video in one day. So today is day 2 and shirt number 2, and we're just going to keep moving on. So where was I? I think I was about to tell you that one thing that I found beneficial about my program is that it is a small program. It's relatively new as well, and I like the small feel to it. Kind of like I said about the funding, I think that the small program lended itself well to a non-competitive atmosphere. Everyone was really chill for the most part, and I really like that. I've heard that sometimes programs, maybe even fully funded programs, can get a little bit competitive, but we were just, I don't know, all nobodies at this little nobody small school, and it was great. And the class sizes were small, and we got to see the professors all the time and talk to them in the hall or before class or after class, go to their offices. It's really personable, easy to talk to people. The last benefit I want to talk about is the benefit of workshopping with other people. That is really helpful. And that's something that you'll experience regardless of what program you go to. So it was really nice being able to bounce ideas off of other people and getting their input. I didn't always enjoy workshops, but for the most part, they were really good. Even if I didn't particularly love specific suggestions that people gave, I noticed that just having those suggestions helped me to crack my pieces back open again and look at them with new eyes and find things that I could do to improve them on my own. Okay, so let's talk about some of the cons, some of the things that turned out to be not as ideal as I had hoped. And some of these, you'll notice, I also listed as pros. So some things were a double-edged sword. So I mentioned it's a small program that I went to, and that was good. Lots of things were great because of that. But there were some trade-offs. For example, there's no nationally circulating literary journal here at WKU. We have a little undergrad-run English department journal, but the issues don't really leave campus. And so we didn't really have the kind of experience that some MFA programs give of actually working on a real literary journal that actually sends issues out to the general public. Another thing is that while we did have some pretty good visiting writers come and do readings and workshops, those were few and far between, and they were, for the most part, I think fairly obscure writers, new writers, local writers, writers who were alumni of the school. People have done some really cool things, but probably not anyone you've heard of. And so they were good, but at bigger programs, you'd have the benefit of a larger budget that would allow for more of these kinds of events, and they would be more high-profile events, possibly. One of the expectations I've heard people have about MFA programs is that they think that MFA programs are going to connect them with agents and publishers. And I don't know if there are programs out there that do that. I'm sure that programs like Iowa, at least, editors are really eyeing programs like that. But here, we didn't have those kinds of connections. But I was okay with that because if my work gets published, I want it to be because it's good, not because I know someone who knows somebody. And our professors were really good at helping us understand the publishing industry and answering any questions we had about it. So I don't feel like I was missing out too much there, but it's something to keep in mind. One downside was definitely university politics between the larger graduate school and the English department, between the English department and the MFA program. I noticed some friction here and there, and it was kind of interesting sometimes. There's a divide between creative writing and literary studies, that sort of thing. So some of that wasn't the best, but it wasn't anything super dramatic. That may be a little different at bigger programs that are more established. They have more of a reputation. Here, it's a fairly new program. They were even unsure about if the program was going to continue at one point, but thankfully it's continuing. It's even expanding from a 2-year to a 3-year program, so that's cool. Okay, so let's talk about workload. This was something I was really nervous about coming into graduate school. I wasn't sure if I was going to be up for the challenge of grad school, and I was trying to train myself to be able to write for hours a day. But on one hand, the workload ended up not being anything that much more difficult than my undergraduate experience, but you do have a lot of work to do. I think there's this fantasy that you go to an MFA program just to write and get published and learn about writing all day long, but there's a lot of other stuff you have to do too. You have to teach classes, there's other responsibilities that they may give you. I managed to always have one workshop class every semester, and that was nice. gave me an excuse to write every semester. But when the cohort after me came in, we had a kind of get to know you meeting with the English department, and there was a Q&A portion, and one of the new MFA students asked if anyone had any advice for finding writing time, and a bunch of people in the room laughed. They were like, haha, what's writing time? Which is sad in a creative writing program, but I don't think this is unusual. But I was pleasantly surprised with what I was able to do with the time I had, and I did a lot of writing. It wasn't hours and hours every day, but I was able to fit it into the cracks in ways that were really cool. And I got some cool publications because of it, and a lot of cool experience, and I'm still seeing the benefits of that. I want to talk about workshopping again really quick, because that was one of those double-edged sword items. I liked the workshops, like I said, and it was a really good experience. But I did feel a little bit out of place as an essayist. I was the only one the whole time I was there among the poets and fiction writers. I should say I'm also a poet, but I was focused on essay writing for most of the time I was there. So even though the workshops were good, I kept feeling like the fiction writers wanted my essays to conform to the ideas of the short story. And in many ways, essays can, but essays can also be different. And I feel like I was getting advice from people who didn't understand my genre as well as I hoped. But it still pushed me to improve my characterization and my plot development and all of those things that you find when you're writing fiction. One thing that turned out to be a little different than my expectation was the amount of mentorship I received. There was a fair amount of mentorship, and professors were always available to answer my questions. But one thing that surprised me a little bit is that it was just kind of assumed that you are a writer and you know how to write and you can go do your writing. And I was surprised that there wasn't always a huge emphasis on craft and learning craft, and I wish there had been more of that. Tom Hunley, who I mentioned earlier, did a lot of craft. That was cool. In the poetry workshop that we did with him, I learned all kinds of stuff. That was really cool. But still, it turned out to be a little different. I kind of just naively assumed that there would be a professor there to say, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. But they just kind of assume you're a writer. You got in because you're good. Just do your thing, and we're here to help if you have questions, basically. And of course, the professors were also a part of the workshops, and they gave really helpful feedback there. But it wasn't the formal craft instruction that I had anticipated. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just a thing that was different than my expectation. Okay, last thing. So like a lot of MFA students, I wanted to teach after I graduated. And I knew going into it that that was kind of a long shot, at least for the kind of teaching that most people dream about, the actual like teaching in an MFA program or a program where you are doing workshops and you are a tenure track faculty and all that kind of stuff. I knew it was going to be hard to break past that adjuncting rut that a lot of people find themselves in, and it's difficult to get out of. And so I knew that teaching was going to be difficult afterward. But once I graduated, I just kind of froze, and I realized I don't even know how to write a CV, let alone find a job. And I realized that even though the English department spent a year training us in the writing center and in shadowing classes and in teaching classes, I realized I feel unprepared to go into academia as an instructor. And it's not necessarily the fault of the program or the professors, but if I were to do things over again, I would ask more questions about how do you do a CV and how do you find a teaching job that's good? I'd ask all those kinds of questions. In the end, I'm really glad I did an MFA, and I'm really glad I went to WKU. I really like the people there. I like the small program. I like the things I learned. I like my cohort. I became friends with them. And I'm proud of my diploma that is still sitting on my bookshelf, unframed. And even though it's cheesy and completely untrue, I like to think of myself as a master of creative writing. It's nice having a master's degree. I'm definitely no master, but I do feel an added sense of validity and confidence in my writing now. And my writing has definitely improved so much from my MFA. And that was the point. That was the goal, was to become a better writer. Like I said, I wanted to teach and all that, but I knew that that was going to be unlikely maybe. And I knew that it was going to be worth it for me just to be a better writer, because writing is what I want to do with my life. And for that reason, my MFA was a success. I really liked it. It was good, and it's going to help me a lot moving forward. Last but not least, if you are currently considering applying to MFA programs or are in the process of applying to MFA programs, I've got a couple of resources for you that I hope can help. The first one is 2 years ago, I made a video about how I got accepted to 4 MFA programs. And I'm going to put the link to that video in the description so you can go take a look if you want. I walk you through the process I went through to get accepted to 4 MFA programs. The other resource I'd like to offer is that I am now on Fiverr, and you can look me up. I'll put a link in the description. And if you need help with your personal statement or your writing sample, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to workshop with you and help you feel confident as you apply to programs. Okay, I think that just about covers it. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'd love to answer those. I'd love to connect with you on Twitter. I'll put a link in the description. I'd love to chat. I'd love to see where your MFA journey takes you. Bye.